Hello. So back to the library. The ice has cleared away. It actually wasn't too bad yesterday, but when I looked outside about an hour before my time in the study room was booked, my street still looked pretty icy, so I said, bleh, just go the next day. And lo and behold, roads are good, car was even pretty clear. Always a plus. So at the moment, I decided to mix things up a little. So the tablet is sitting on the biographies of Clara Barton and Ulysses Grant, as well as something called Dancing in the Dark, A Cultural History of the Great Depression. And the little skinnier book that's propping up the tablet so it doesn't shoot up my nose is the biography of Howard Zinn, which actually looks kind of interesting, and I may end up checking it out. Anyway, the topic of the readings that were assigned for the week that I'm making up for now were more about sampling, but specifically sampling LGBT people for different health studies and some of the issues involved there. I kind of feel like I've already covered the sampling stuff, such as if you are going to recruit your sample from the local LGBT bars and advocacy groups, then you do just have to acknowledge that you're going to have the sample bias of missing people who aren't connected with either of those places. And even if you do respondent-driven sampling, people who specifically avoid being connected with the LGBT community because they have fears about what being connected to the community could cause in terms of repercussions in their lives, you're going to miss them anyway. And there may be no help for that other than to just acknowledge that that is always going to be a limitation that we won't know if there are differences in the health risks and health behaviors of people who fit into that category, and we may not be able to know that. So rather than focusing on the sampling issues in the stuff in the bibliography below, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I did on my paper for this class, which was on the Nutbrock et al. Paper about transgender women and depression and substance abuse, but it was specifically looking at transgender women who are in relationships with cisgender men. My issue that I really critiqued about that study was that I felt their definition of transgender women was too broad, although it was probably constrained by the fact that they were drawing their sample from a larger study from the New York Transgender Project. One little line that I missed as I was reading it, which would have been very important to make some acknowledgement of in that paper and any other time for the rest of the quarter that I referred to that paper, was that they specifically said that they had involved transgender and gender variant people in every stage of that study, from conception to publication. So while I still feel that there's a bit of ambiguity around defining transgender women as people who were assigned male at birth, but who do not currently identify as male in all situations or roles, because I feel like that ends up encapsulating some people who probably really identify as genderqueer, or gender fluid, or non-binary, or agender, or some other term that either I'm unfamiliar with or hasn't been invented yet, or they just don't care for labels. And if you don't break that down further within the study, it might be enough. In fact, it's probably a good idea for the study as a whole to have as broad a definition as you can, but then you do want to make sure that there are some within group measures to see if those who identify as women all the time have different experiences than those who identify as not male some of the time. And also a little, since you're looking at things like depression, which are involved with neurotransmitters and biochemistry, I'd kind of like to know if you're looking at people who have or have not had any sort of hormone treatment, because that can definitely impact a person's biochemical soup and what their brain is swimming in and how it processes everything. So while I feel like I was in some ways unfair to the study because I had missed that one piece, and one of my big conclusions for the quarter was, yes, use really broad definitions, but make sure you have really granular analysis and involve the people of the community you're studying from the get-go. They actually did. So, my bad. And if a group of people who are transgender and gender variant, they even went so far as to make that specific, felt that this was a workable definition of transgender women, then who am I as a cisgender woman to argue with that, other than to say that to make sure we have the best knowledge possible, make sure that there's a lot of breakdown in the analysis of your results to see who the results can be generalized to and who they can't. Interestingly, what got me looking specifically at transgender women was a conversation that happened randomly on the discussion board of the course about the differences in heart attack experiences between men and women. And so I started wondering, well, what differences do we see in transgender men and women? And what factors might impact that? And so maybe that would give us a better idea why we see differences and who needs to be educated to look for what. Is it estrogen exposure that changes the way women often perceive a heart attack as opposed to how cisgender men do? If so, then transgender women who have been exposed to estrogen might very well have those symptoms and not have been getting educated by their providers to watch for those symptoms, such as back pain. Who expects back pain to have anything to do with a heart attack? Nobody, including women who've been told that that is a potential sign. And then conversely, what about transgender men? If, as somebody in that discussion thread had put out there, the difference is caused by distribution of body mass and center of gravity, since that a lot of that comes down to skeletal stuff that would largely, I would think, be more correlated to the gender assigned at birth and the biological sex observed at birth. I don't know that for sure, but if that is the case, then if that difference in symptom experience is based on skeletal structures, then maybe transgender men should also be getting educated that you may experience heart attack symptoms that are more similar to what cisgender women experience. That said, as I carried this through the semester and decided that transgender women would therefore be my target population because I was interested in seeing if I could learn anything about this, I then stumbled across an article which I cannot find. If I ever do find it, believe me, it's going up here so I can find it again, saying that it's all malarkey, it's not a gendered difference at all, in which case I guess we just need to make sure that people in general know that there are a variety of symptoms that can let you know that you're having a heart attack and watch out for them. But I need to find that article and make sure it actually had some sort of basis other than I don't believe this stuff. Because most of what I found when I tried to go searching for it today was everything all supporting the idea that cisgender men and cisgender women have very different experiences or can have very different experiences. It's not that cisgender women can't have crushing chest pain for a heart attack, but that they may not, and they may have these other symptoms instead. So what I ended up linking down below is from Johns Hopkins, and I would have liked actually something that had a date attached to it, especially if there is something out there that is disproving this, to say, okay, so that was posted before this other thing. But like many websites, they did not put a last updated on tag anywhere on the page, so I have no idea when that went up and when it was last checked for validity. But that's what I've got to work with for now, other than, say, WebMD, and I'm not going to link WebMD, but other similar type sources. let you know when I have anything more on that. Got myself a little lost there because I've given up on having an actual script. Of the other references below, one of them is a chapter from the Fenway Guide to LGBT Health, and that's the 2015 edition, which I love. It's a wonderful book, great resource, probably one of the most important resources to have in this field of study. And that particular chapter I was referencing because I needed a source other than Tumblr for a lot of the different terms that people use for different variations of gender. And that's a pretty good authoritative source. So that particular chapter, that's why I was referencing it. But for transgender health in general, it is a good source because that chapter is focused on understanding trans and gender variant identities and then what some of the health issues are that need to be watched for, educated for, and so on. And I think that's about it. There is more in the actual bibliography below. And if you have any questions, please do comment. Thoughts, other references, rebuttals, love to hear any of it. And in the meantime, have a good one.